Welcome to Avaya, Susan.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. I shortened your bio because there were so many amazing things to talk about and thought maybe the first question I would ask you is if you could share a little bit about your work and how you got into it today.
In the beginning, I've always just been interested in human beings, and I was always interested in other cultures. And so as I went through life, I was looking at what tied us together as human beings rather than the differences that we always want to look at that make us seem like we're different than each other. And I knew fairly early on that I wanted to work with birth and with women. And I really feel that the traditions around birth in any culture tell you a lot about who that culture is and how they express in the world. So I started out as a traditional midwife doing home births. And when I was really clear that this is what I wanted to do with my life, I went back and got all the right letters after my name, became a nurse and a nurse midwife, and have worked in many cultures since then. I spent several years on the Navajo reservation. I worked up in Seattle with Pacific Rim cultures and Alaska, went to Africa for the CDC for a while to work with people over there, and have just really enjoyed that. I didn't have my own child till I hit 45, so hung up my spurs in terms of birth at that point and began doing GYN care. And the last 20 years have worked exclusively with menopausal women. I kind of followed the arc of my own aging as to what I was digging into and finding out more about.
Yeah, that happens to so many of us, right? We will follow that and whatever we're going through, oftentimes that does become our work.
Right.
So as far as menopause goes, Susan, why do you think in your experience it's so hard in our culture?
Well, I think there are several reasons. Some are cultural. Our culture tends to deify 15-year-olds. I mean, if you look at what the standards of beauty are and what people look at as living a full and active life, it's often very, very youth oriented. And so many women arrive at menopause feeling like life is over because they're losing their youth, they're losing their fertility. And certainly in the generation a little older than yours, closer to mine, women often were encouraged to see their value as very much identified with who their partner was. With getting married, women would often go to college to find a husband more than to study a certain subject. So there's a cultural focus on youth. That's one thing. Another thing is that the hormonal transitions in our life are very, there's a lot of upheaval. They're very complete in a certain way. Our hormones turn us into different creatures. And it's kind of a trite metaphor, but I really look at it like a caterpillar and a butterfly have exactly the same DNA, but they are very different creatures in terms of what they look like, how they live, what their destiny is, what they focus on. And the same thing kind of happens to us. We go through our transitions at puberty, or any woman who's ever been pregnant knows that your body is not your own. You become a different being when you're pregnant. And so I like to remind women that, you know, when they're going through this and everything seems like it's change and upheaval, you've done this before. And you know, you'll find your footing again, and nature has a plan in place. It all unfolds according to that plan. So hormonal transitions are hard. Also, our life tasks, I think, what life is asking of us becomes very different at menopause. And so we generally don't do real well with change in our culture. That creates anxiety for people when everything changes. And so all of those reasons. But often too, I think it's the stories we hear. We educate each other by the stories we tell. And so often women are still working out their own trauma over things. And so the stories they tell are traumatic. And that's what those coming behind tend to think is coming. So
yeah, so interesting. And I'm so glad you reminded all of us that we have done this before. It might be a little bit of a different journey, whether a woman has been pregnant in the past and has had the experience of, yes, their body not being their own, or going through puberty way back and having the experience of so many changes hormonally and physically. So that's a really good reminder. And what are some ways you think we can make this journey a more positive experience?
Well, I think to be present in it, to realize that this is a journey, that it has a certain shape to it, that there are things that we can expect, and to be willing to look at our lives and how we arrive here. Because when I say our earliest experiences shape our menopause, they really do. The messages that we got as very young girls, for instance, and how we created our identity as women, and how we think of ourselves as whether we're people that can handle change and transition. Those things are important. And one of the most important things physically having to do with menopause is stress, and the state that we arrive at menopause in regard to stress. And believe it or not, that starts 3 months before you're even conceived. Some of the things get laid down in your body that will begin that journey as to where you find yourself in menopause in terms of stress.
Wow.
And
So that would be whatever's happening with your mother during 3 months before conception is going to be totally influencing your life, your whole life.
yeah, nature is fascinating, really. And we found more and more as they started unraveling the human genome that very little of it is actually due to your genes. Genes are not causal. It's the environment that triggers our genes to express in certain ways.
Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.